pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, we need a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Sauger, supported by Kraft. Please vote. The agenda is approved. Item 4, approval of the minutes dated January 31st, 2019. Need a motion for that. Moved by Leonetti, supported by Hall. Please vote to approve the minutes. Motion passes. Item number 5, public participation. Anyone from the public wish to address this body? Anyone from the public? Third and final time, anyone from the public? Seeing no one from the public, we'll close that portion of the agenda and go on to the Public Services Committee recommendation. Contract with Colasante Construction. It's a motion to approve the contract with Colasante Construction to provide construction management services for the vehicle maintenance facility from March 1st, 2019 to January 1st, 2020 in the amount of $3,265,023 for roads. Funding is available in the roads budget. Hi, Brian.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Chairman. Yes, seeking approval of a construction contract oversight, construction management of our vehicle maintenance facility in the amount that you had stated just recently. We had originally went out for an RFQ for the construction management services. There were 6 firms that had submitted proposals. We selected 3 to interview, to bring in for a final interview. Colasante was selected on the qualification-based criteria, and looking forward to, continuing on with our bid package in the future with Colasante as a construction manager.
If I could, just one
Please.
point of clarification. So this recommendation represents Colasante being hired as your construction manager, as well as the costs associated with bid package 1. We will be issuing bid package 2 in about a week or so, and we will be coming forward to offer an amendment to capture the costs associated with bid package 2. So today you're awarding the $3.2 million, and we'll be bringing forward an amendment for you as a recommendation and consideration in about a month or so. We also have Scott Kolakowski here today from Colasante Construction. He's here to answer any questions you have about Colasante Construction. They are a Macomb County-based contractor, and we're looking forward to working with them on this project.
Okay, very good. We'll open it up for questions. First on the list, Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a note for other commissioners, this is a bypass item, and the reason for this is because we want to get them moving sooner than later. If we would have had to put this on a normal schedule, they would have lost out on some good weather here that we're hopefully going to get here coming next week. I don't know. But anyway, that's why it's a bypass item, so for point of information. Thank you.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Hi, thank you. The problem with the iPad is it's hard to know which document has the stuff you're looking for in here. There's a section in here that talks about, right after it talks about this fee, it talks about then there being another fee to cover their cost and overhead. Like this is, I'm hoping it's in the, you know what I'm talking about?
The note is subsequent award recommendations will include a balance of the cost of the work as well as Colasante's construction fee and overhead and profit, I believe is what you're referencing. And what I was trying to...
Here it is. Include the balance of the cost as well as the Colasante's construction's fee.
Correct.
And I was like, this isn't their construction's fee?
So this is the fee, and what you're approving today is the fee associated with the work associated with bid package 1. So when we bring forward bid package 2, their fee is derived from that cost of work at 2.7%. So we're only awarding today the fee associated with the work in bid package 1. And the amendment that you'll have coming forward will capture not only the cost of construction, but the fee associated with that cost of construction.
And we have budgeted 10 million for this project, correct?
Originally.
Originally, we were
Originally.
10 million, then we came and we updated that budget.
What did we add to it?
1.5.
1.5, we're
To
at
make it
11.
11.5.
So are we still within the 1.5 if their fee is going to be more than the 3 million, are we going to be headed up above that then?
No, we're not, we're within the 11.5 million
Okay, thank you.
within this recommendation, yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things I'd like to point out. Number one, I want to disclose to the board that the company that I work for has done work with the contractor that's being recommended today, though it won't influence my decision one way or the other. If the board would like me to abstain, I'd be happy to do so. They're not currently working for them, but years past, they have worked for them. So I want to disclose that to the board. Second thing I would like to bring up is that will this be a non-prevailing wage job?
This is a non-prevailing wage project.
Okay. The reason.
Well, how do I want to state this? This is we're following the recommendations, the guidelines set forth by the purchasing department, as well as this body, that this is a non-prevailing wage project.
I strongly recommend that we have Corporation Counsel and Finance take a look at this, because state dollars, there's no prevailing wage anymore. But there is Davis-Bacon, or Mavis, however you say it.
Davis-Bacon.
Davis-Bacon
Yes.
Federal. And if I believe Act 51 money comes from the federal government, we may want to take a look at it. I don't know all those rules, and that'll change the pricing of what we have going on. So I strongly recommend that we take a good, close look at that, make sure we're following whatever rules that are supposed to be followed. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So just to follow up, so you guys are going to talk with our corp counsel about that to figure that out?
We will do what's necessary to ensure we're within guidelines and requirements.
Thank you. Commissioner Sauger?
Yeah, I'm just curious, where's it going to be built at?
It's going to be at our Clinton Service Center off 15 Mile Road.
Harvard?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marv. Commissioner Hall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Previously, I had asked Plant Moran to supply a listing of the roles and responsibilities and the amount of resources involved, so I want to thank you for having that included into this packet. And as far as Commissioner abstaining, I don't see any relevance in doing that personally, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any other questions or comments? Seeing no one else on the list, do we get a motion on that at all? We need a motion for this. Moved by Duge, supported by Hall. Please vote. Item passes 12-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
And with-
Commissioners.
Thank you. And with that, that will conclude the Public Services portion of the agenda. We'll now move on to the Records and Public Safety portion of the agenda, and that's going to be chaired by Chairman Leonetti. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. First item on our agenda is a presentation. Sheriff, come on up. Little housekeeping before you begin. I'd like to get a motion to receive and file his presentation, if we could. Moved by Sauger, supported by Carabelli. Okay, Sheriff, the floor is yours.
Press the button. There you go.
Test, test, test. All right, now we're on. All right, it's been a long time coming. We are finally at the point where we have a direction in which we want to go with the Macomb County Jail. Last year, this commission approved us to hire Partners and Architect, who is a local company, to be the principal in this project. And and I'll do the introductions in a little bit, because Partner and Architect also went out and secured some of the top corrections architects, the top programming companies around America as it relates to care, custody, and providing services to inmates incarcerated in jail. My team, which most of them are behind me, along with our team that we have contracted, have spent countless hours of putting together what we believe is the best recommendation. And we are here today to give you an update of where we're at. At the end, we'll take on some questions, and obviously there's a couple other items on the agenda that we would like approval for, so we can put this motion, this project, wherever it's got to go to get it done, so we can change the way we're doing business there at the Macomb County Jail. So I just want to introduce our team. Most of you know from Partners and Architect, Mike Malone and Andrew Sawinski. From STV, Justice Architectural Design, Engineering, and Project Controls, Price Jepson. Price. From Pulitzer, Bolgard Associates, Curtis Pulitzer. And our contractual consultant that has been giving us guidance and working along with this project, Jim Robertson. Most of you know Jim. He's been here before to present. Again, today we are going to present the enhanced conceptual design for a future Macomb County Jail. We'll detail some programming, services, staffing analysis, and estimated costs. This presentation is a comprehensive outline of our findings and recommendations to this board and also to the citizens of Macomb County. I ask each one of you to keep an open mind during this presentation. You are all aware of the many issues, challenges, repair costs that we deal with constantly at the county jail in our current environment. My goal is to move this project forward and come back in front of this body and ask for approval to move forward and seek a funding solution. We have worked hard to bring forward to this board and to the citizens of Macomb County the best solution, and I am here now to present that to you along with my team. We'll now turn it over to Mike Malone. Mike?
Thanks, Sheriff. And I'd like to start out with thanking the Sheriff and his entire team for working alongside of us, keeping us in check, allowing us to really do our job. And thanks to the County Macomb and this board for allowing us to work on this great project. So we have a lot to share with you today. A brief little agenda is in front of you. We've been working on this project, I think, since March or April of last year, so there's been a lot going on, almost 10 months of solid effort from our team, and we're going to try to condense all of that into a understandable and you know, try not to bore you to death, but try to keep it within a reasonable amount of time. So you're going to see a lot of information in front of you, and you know, we'll have time for questions at the end if that's okay. So we're going to start out with an overview from Jim Robertson and Curtis Pulitzer of our overall needs assessment and programming efforts, which took a long time to do and really develop that document, which is what we're working from to develop this new facility. We kind of looked at all the existing facilities, components of the existing jail facility. There's multiple renditions of numerous renovations, additions, projects dating back to the 50s that we're going to give you a quick overview of. From that, we went into some overall master planning, big picture concepts to try to flush through some ideas, some possibilities, working with the county and their team and kind of narrowing into a direction that we should move into. We also have a little discussion about projected staffing, because staffing is a long-term cost that is going to be with you forever. So our decisions are really guided by that as well, or strongly influenced by the staffing information that we have. And we have our conceptual design that we like to share, and there's a lot more that you're not going to see because we'd be here forever. But anyways, we're going to try to touch on the key points and hopefully give you enough information today. I'm going to invite up Curtis and Jim Robertson to do this next piece.
Thanks. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to echo Mike's statement that we really want to thank the Sheriff's Office, the Sheriff and his key staff, and his consultant, Jim Robertson. We've really been in a collaboration over these past 10 months. They have worked so hard with us, and they've been an amazing client, and so we're really happy to be here to do this work for you all. What I want to start with first is looking at what are the current issues at the jail. Most of you are familiar with the facility. It is a hodgepodge of different buildings built in different eras, but most importantly, it really does not reflect contemporary jail design. Where jails are today, and we'll talk more about it as we go through the presentation, is jails need to operate in a direct supervision format, meaning staff are directly inside housing areas, watching inmates, interacting with inmates, helping to prevent suicides, which is a big issue in the current facility, and we just do not have that in this facility. It goes all the way from barred front jail cells, the traditional 1900 type jail cells, even to the tower, and you'll see some more pictures in a few minutes. So that is really important because it does compromise safety and security of the inmate population. And most importantly is the area that, we'll talk more about it, that's so inadequate in the facility is the intake processing area. We're looking at creating a space that will allow for the safe processing of people coming into the jail system, opportunities to divert inmates out of the jail system so we can keep a cap on the jail population. Again, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And the appropriate spaces to do that in, it just does not exist in the current jail.
I'm going to talk about the next 4 bullet points and then lead you into a conversation going backwards a little bit about some of the work that we did in May. One of the reasons that we took a hard look at the current facility and its operations was to make sure that we addressed each of those issues during the needs assessment, programming, and design process. And so that's why we identified this list of deficiencies or inadequacies. The issue of the lack of treatment space in order to help the individuals better themselves while in custody is paramount to this facility and its operation. It is lacking in your current building. The Sheriff's Department does its best to provide those programs and services, but space is at a minimum. And so we want to make sure that we address that issue in our process. That also leads to the minimal opportunities for programs and services. There are a number of beds in the facility that are provided for general population inmates, maximum security inmates, lower security inmates, but there is a definitive deficiency in the lack of specialized treatment beds for managing the type of inmates that we have today. Curtis is going to go into more of that when we talk about the mental health individuals that we have in custody. But the inmate population and the needs of those folks has changed over time, and the facility has not been able to keep up with providing those types of beds. And finally, your current building with its current configuration is very staff intensive. So our goal during the programming and design process has been to create a more efficient staffing model while still meeting the needs of safety and security and of the offender population. More efficient doesn't mean less, it means a better response, a better ability to manage behavior. This one?
Yes, sorry, the black one, big one.
Oh, the big one. Okay. So let me go backwards for a moment. Technology is not my strong point. Let me go back for a moment and kind of refresh our memory as to the presentation that we did in May of 2017, which was the delivery of the needs assessment report, just to give us some context. In that needs assessment report, we did some capacity forecasts. We did 9 of them based on a number of different scenarios. The scenarios were based on how many people come to jail, how long they stay, what is the potential growth of the county population, and then items 4 and 5, which are these peaking and/or classification factors. When we look at averages, we recognize the difficulty with only looking at an average because it means half the time you're above it and half the time you're below it. So we want to make sure that we had a recognition and an understanding of what are those times that we are over and above our averages and make some adjustments to our projections. We chose and recommended a capacity for the future going to the year 2040 of 1,693 inmates in custody. It's an odd number in terms of how it's arrived at, and you'll see how we adjusted that number based on some classification distributions. But that number was arrived at with an understanding and a firm commitment that we were going to implement certain recommendations from the Criminal Justice System Master Plan to help better manage our offender population. And those two things that we focused on right in the beginning was this overall comprehensive assessment process to fully address the needs of the individual as they hit the door of the jail, and to divert as necessary, to identify what their needs are and to respond to those needs in an efficient fashion, and to also implement full-service pretrial services. Those two items were identified as a way to manage our bed capacity. Absent those programs and services, we felt that the bed count would be 2,457. So we're making a recommendation, as we did back then, to continue that process and manage the offender population. So again, we had 11 recommendations in total. I can't cite all 11 of them right now from memory, but we had 11 recommendations, and we prioritized them as those that had the greatest impact on managing offender behavior. Create this centralized intake processing facility. That's the drawings and the designs and the programming that you're going to see today, to allow us to assess individuals as soon as they come in the door and to make the appropriate recommendation for managing their behavior early in the process, not later in the process, and to fund a full-service pretrial services program so that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we have pretrial services available to assess those individuals, to make recommendations for where they are placed, either in the facility or in the community, and to provide a comprehensive recommendation to the courts. As a part of that May 11th, 2017 presentation, we had some capital improvements that we were recommending. Begin the process to design the Central Intake and Assessment Center. We're using a targeted capacity at that time of 1,712 inmates. That 1693 number, whatever it was, got tweaked a little bit based on how you would distribute some of the classifications. We wanted to make sure, and this is a key point, and you'll hear this throughout the presentation, that we build the right bed to manage behavior. You'll see some photos of some parts of the building, and the beds are there, but it's not the right bed for the current inmate and offender population. To make those improvements that are necessary for medical and mental health services, Curtis is going to share with you a slide that demonstrates the severity of the deficiency in need versus what is available for providing treatment and services for those two offender populations, and to make support services, food service, laundry, warehouse adjustments as are necessary going into the future. Real quickly, we established some goals for centralized intake and assessment, is to provide this comprehensive review, comprehensive assessment of the individuals. It is a key component in increasing public safety. Just as pretrial services is there, this whole process is to make sure that the right person stays in custody, and if there is an ability to divert someone or keep them in a lower custody setting without managing or interfering with public risk, then that's what we want to do. To provide informed release decisions to the court and to other criminal justice stakeholders, so that we provide them the best information necessary to make informed decisions, and to begin that process of managing behavior at the beginning of the process, not after they have been in custody for a period of time. We created a definition of what this type of a facility would be. It's a single facility where everybody is arrested, or everybody that is booked and is processed. It is a facility that provides that process to determine public safety risk. It provides the appropriate space to manage those individuals in the least restrictive custody setting necessary, and it provides appropriate staffing levels to provide that full range of services 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Companion to that was full services, pretrial services program. This is not an either-or scenario, and we made that recommendation back in May, and we've continued with that process. Central booking and assessment is only successful if pretrial services is there to help as a companion, as a team, to ensure public safety. It's essential to making sure folks flow through the system efficiently and effectively. It provides this universal screening for all defendants to determine their risk right in the beginning and to manage them appropriately. It gives us that court data and information to the courts to make or to continue to make informed decisions. It helps with indigent screening so that those that need representation are identified early, identifies those candidates for diversion. They pose a risk, but it's not a risk that requires custody, but some other form of supervision in the community. Let's make that decision and put those folks in the community and manage them in the least restrictive fashion necessary. It helps us resolve that issue around holds and people that are being in custody for a variety of reasons and to make those decisions sooner as opposed to later. Paramount to all of this is using a risk-based assessment tool so that we look at it not on just a financial issue, but a risk-based assessment, and it is key to jail population management. So we have central booking and intake, full trial, pretrial services, the recommendations back in May. That's what we've continued with this process. So now it's Curtis, he's going to take you back into discussion on the programming and the needs assessment and some information about the current facility.
Many of you have been through the facility and you probably are familiar with it, but just some pictures speak 1,000 words. So here on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side is the older portions of the jail, typical barred front cells, again, indicative of the type of architecture and management that was prevalent in the 1800s and early 1900s, although these buildings are much newer. In the center, we have a picture of the tower. That's your most recent building. And again, it's an indirect supervision. The view is here somewhat from there's a control bubble with an officer inside that bubble, but is not providing direct supervision to the inmates that are back behind this glazed area. Intake, as I said earlier, was so cramped. Here's just where the property room is. This is just indicative of the lack of space that they have down there. And last but not least, the mental health. Again, there are very, very few beds, but the beds they do have are totally inappropriate for the treatment and bringing back to restoring people to wellness in that environment. So what does the future look like for the Macomb County Jail? Well, again, first and foremost, at the very top is direct supervision. I think the Sheriff's Office and his key staff are all on board with that concept, and they recognize the value of it, and that's where we need to go. As Jim said, the central intake and assessment process area is critical, and the expansion of pretrial services, and we will see examples of open booking, where the prevailing thought is when arrestees come in, they're not locked in a cell the way they are today. They actually sit out in an open area, and they're observed, they're safe, they're being watched. Those with mental health issues can be observed better there, and then are processed through, if they cannot be diverted, they come processed through into the jail. Mental health treatment, again, is critical. That's going to be, you'll see again the number of beds we're proposing for that. Again, you just don't have it today in your current facility. And last but not least, expanding opportunities for reentry. The people in your jail, the offenders there are, for the most part, citizens of Macomb County. How can we restore them to the community? They go out better than they came in, and they don't come back. So those are some of the key goals that we started with before we began programming. One of the other things we did before we began the programming process is that we wanted to go out and see model facilities, to see model jail facilities, particularly high-rise jails, since we know whatever will happen here will be a high-rise facility, and also to look at model treatment facilities for healthcare and medical and mental health care. So the 4 facilities we toured last year was the Arlington County Detention Facility. That's the facility on the right. That is in basically Washington, D.C. We went to Onondaga County, which is the facility on the lower right, and that's in Syracuse, New York. We went to the Cook County Jail, which is Chicago, and then we went to the Iowa Correctional Institute for Women, and this particular facility was unique because it's gender-responsive programming for female offenders and has a model mental health facility. So some of the pictures here get illustrative of a contemporary design. What you're looking at here, there are no inmates in this unit, but this is a typical housing unit. This would be the officer station in a direct supervision format with the cells around the officer station. On the lower left, this is in Arlington County. This is what a typical cell might look like in a direct supervision facility. Notice that these are their china fixtures here on the lower left, the china sink, china toilet. Believe it or not, and this is a picture of the day room, this facility here is 23 years old. In 23 years, not one single fixture was broken. Why? Direct supervision helps you manage your facility so things like that don't happen, and inmates care for the facility that they're in. We even have a wooden butcher block desk in that unit and a loose chair. Again, this is what direct supervision looks like, and this is what it looks like in a day room area. These are the cells again. This is the officer station where we're standing. And there's another picture of a different direct supervision housing unit in Syracuse. Again, we're looking from the officer station through the day room area to see the housing components. A really important piece of direct supervision and also contemporary jail design is the ability to have outdoor exercise immediately adjacent to the housing area. So you can meet the standards to get inmates out to be able to do large motor muscle exercise and use it basically 365 days a year. How do we do that? Well, if you look at this lower picture here, this is the day room area. Looking out to the rec area, the officer stations here can see when their inmates are out there. And this is the interior of that space. If you notice, there's a garage door here. That garage door comes down in inclement weather, so that space can be used all year round. Otherwise, it's raised up, and this is a security mesh that allows fresh air and sunlight into the area. Here's a better picture of the exercise area. So inmates can freely go through this door out to that area and come back in again on the morning days and evenings. We talked about intake processing. Again, what does a modern intake processing area look like? This is in Syracuse again. Here's the open waiting concept I mentioned earlier, where the inmates are sitting out in an open area. Here are the two pictures there. Surrounding that open area are services. For example, here are the interview spaces. So pretrial services, for example, would be in interview booths where they could interview staff. Interview inmates, rather. Mental health would be there so they could interview and do medical screening. They could ask the PREA questions, which are the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which is so critical in today's operations. Classification will be there. Other interview space, the booking process will be there. So as you go through the steps of the process, you call the inmates up to those desks and they do the interview process. Now there are holding cells. For example, if you see in the back, there are some holding cells for those that are intractable and don't want to behave. There's a place for you to go. But it's been proven, and this concept's been around for this Arundaka facility itself is over 20 years old, that 95% of the population coming in, once they come into this environment, and it's similar to an emergency waiting room in a hospital, they say, okay, you're treated with respect, I'm going to behave, I'm going to sit here, I'm going to make my phone calls, do what you tell me to do until I'm processed through the facility. Again, it's until you see it, it's hard to believe it, but it really does work. What does healthcare look like? Again, this is what an examination room should look like. We don't have that in the Macomb County Jail. And in this picture on the lower right is a skilled nursing unit. Again, we'll have that in the new facility as well to be able to bring people back from the hospital. So it's very costly to put somebody in the hospital with 2 correctional officers on guard 24/7. We already have the staff in the jail, so bring them into the jail. And this picture here, what you see in the center is a workstation it's an integrated treatment team with correctional officer staff, medical staff, and on the outside these are the skilled nursing patient rooms. Last but not least, mental health. Again, we don't have appropriate space, so on the upper left, this space here is an acute mental health unit. These are for those inmates, seriously mental inmates that have the most severe acute problems and acting out until they decompensate, and there's a place to put them, and with maximum glazing, the ability to see what's happening in there. When they calm down, they will move into a unit like this, the regular housing, and very different than the picture I showed you earlier. Again, if they are decompensating, we also have the ability to put them on what's called a padded cell, but this is a cell where they can be safe, there's no self-harm, and they can be in there for a few hours till they cool down, and they're brought out again and put into a better location. Programs, as we said earlier, are really important. How do we provide reentry? How do we provide services to bring our offenders back into the community in a safe and in a better manner? And one of the things we do is try to minimize movement in a jail. Again, we don't have that today in the Macomb County Jail. So you place those program areas right on the same level as the housing. So what you're looking at here in this particular picture, this is in Syracuse. Here's the program center here and here. This back here is a housing unit. So inmates can come walk a few steps down and enter this area, and inside the area there are offices, there's counseling spaces, there's multi-purpose rooms, there are other functions that can provide services to the inmate on the same floor. They go there for the services and then go back to their housing unit. They can even go unescorted depending on their security classification. So while we were, again, before we began the programming, one of the other tasks we performed was looking at who's in our jail, particularly for the medical and mental health population, the most vulnerable population in the facility. And again, this is a complicated chart, but just want to focus a couple of things. The key points are that 16% of the average daily population in this 5-year period were seriously mentally ill inmates. That equates to 190 inmates of your jail population, or SMIs. And there are no appropriate beds for any of them right now in the current jail. So that's a severe liability the jail has, the sheriff's office has, the county has, and we've got to correct that moving forward into the future. Suicides is another major issue, and I'm sure you're all aware of what's been happening at the facility. Just to point out some key data, on a daily average between 2016 and 2017, there were 3,429 suicide watch events, an average of 4.69 a day. And in terms of successful suicides, there were 3. Those 3, believe it or not, were in the tower, the newest building you have, which is one of the most dangerous buildings you have because there's no direct supervision there. And again, this needs to go away. When direct supervision will go a long way in correcting these and dropping these numbers dramatically. In terms of the overall beds, what are we actually planning? On the left is a chart table that shows all the beds. These are all the classification categories, from high max to medium minimums, and then down below, the green and the pink colors are the medical and mental health population. To illustrate the difference today, these low numbers over here, this is what you have today: 7 beds for medical, 24 beds for mental health, and those are very inappropriate beds. You have no medical detox beds, which is, we're looking at 60 medical detox beds for males and females. And medical detox is not a drunk tank. Today, as you know, the drug problem is very severe. Our offenders coming into our jail today have severe substance abuse problems, alcohol problems, co-occurring disorders with healthcare problems. When they come in, they're sick. They need to be observed in a special area under healthcare, with healthcare supervision, and that's what medical detox is. So this is right adjacent to the clinic. This is not in booking or intake processing. This is a medical function. You have a place to put them in, to restore them to a level of health, and then continue the processing into the jail. Medical, the 30 medical beds, again, are the ability to bring them, to have a skilled nursing facility for males and females so that we don't have to use the hospital. So except for emergencies, or like even for emergency appendicitis, for example, they'll come right back to the jail and be able to be cared for there in a safe and secure economical fashion. So the number of beds here compared to these 2 green lines, 24 today to 166. For the future, 7 medical beds to 90. So this is the most important part of our new planning for the jail. What else is in there besides the housing and medical mental health? Well, there are 18 functional components. You see this long list on the left. These are all the components. And we developed a very detailed program as a document which explains the narrative format, what each function, how each function is to work, and a detailed space program down to the last toilet and janitor's closet for every one of these spaces. Because from that program, we develop a design and the cost estimates for the future. In terms of number of beds, we're looking at 1,672 beds. That includes right now a 64-bed work release center. And the infrastructure, when I say that, for example, areas such as healthcare, the intake processing area, food service are designed to be able to add an addition to the jail if we need to add it. Hopefully we'll never have to add it. But if we do, we can accommodate up to another 304 beds looking down into the future.
So part of our challenge was, before we could present a solution to you, was to really understand your current facilities. So we did a detailed analysis of each component of the current facility. The first slide here is really the oldest section of the jail, the D block, max security rehab, and some of the admin areas. Some of these facilities date back to the 50s. And they still look like they're from the 50s. There's been some updates and there's been some investment over the years, but generally that's kind of what you have to work with. It's very difficult and costly to renovate for the concept that we're trying to implement here, this direct supervision. These current facilities of this section of the building is very difficult to make happen. The tower area, that was a little bit newer. It's about 33 years old. Looks great on the outside. Some of the parts on the inside look pretty shiny and fresh, but there's some real challenges with that facility. It is aging. There's a lot of infrastructure needs to that building, and it's really, we did a detailed evaluation of how we could actually convert this tower to a direct supervision model. And we can almost get there, but it's extremely costly to do that, and there's some severe compromises in the process. This next slide, this is actually a snippet of a video of one section of the tower. I'm going to play this video really quick here. Kind of look to the left of the screen. There's a chunk of masonry that just falls down, and that inmate that was walking up the stairs was actually sitting in that seat that block fell out from. And that was from the highest section in that day room. No real events occurred, nothing really made that fall out, but it was compromised with some of the structure deflecting over time, and some of the anchoring of the masonry is not sufficient from what we've found, and others have investigated this a little further. That's one little area, and this could potentially occur throughout the facility if we really dig deeper. So we had to take that into consideration as well with our reconfiguration or renovation of that particular facility. The newest piece is really the annex. It's about 21 years old. This actually is a direct supervision layout. It's a big open area. You operate it that way as a direct supervision component, and that's really where your weekenders are you coming in there every week. So we really looked at trying to save this piece. It's a very small square footage in comparison to the whole facility, but we did look at saving that. So now I'm going to give you a little overview of the master planning concepts that we had developed over the last 10 months, and we actually presented these to a focus group, or I guess a stakeholders group in November of last year, to try to get some feedback on, are we heading down the right path? So, and these are small, and they're not really meant to be super detailed, but option one here on the top left, this is an all-new facility. So let me back up for a second. We didn't come into this looking like, hey, we're going to propose a new building. What we were asked to do was to come up with a solution that is going to meet your long-term goals and needs. And the idea was we could save part of the building and then add the additional beds and the appropriate beds someplace on the site, and kind of make it all work together. And we have that option as well, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But why we called it option one, I don't know. But option one was a new facility, and the area in blue there is actually the annex. So we were looking at saving the annex and then kind of attaching this facility to that. Option 2 and 3 were kind of an interesting idea. We looked at moving the jail to downtown Mount Clemens. It's really a good thing to have adjacent to the circuit court building for moving inmates back and forth. You have transportation from the current facility here and to other courts as well. But we thought we should study it, since we did level the parking deck that was there adjacent to the circuit court. The site's a little tight for this facility, so we looked at, well, could we put it where the Clemens Center is across the street? Some real challenges with that too, but we thought we should explore it. Option 4 was keeping the tower, so that the section in blue is the tower and the annex adjacent to it, tearing down the other sections of the building, the D block, the max, and the rehab areas, and then adding a new tower component and sheriff's component to that on this side. And then option 5 was a blend of that, trying to save some of the other areas within the building, but there were some real compromises. So we kind of narrowed it to 3 options, and option 3 from our study back in November was the most costly of the 3, between $410 and $430 million. So this involves constructing adjacent to the current circuit court facility. We'd actually have to construct additional parking where the Clemens Center is with some type of connectivity, a tunnel of some sort, and then demolishing the facility at the current site. Option 4 was seriously considered, and this was renovating that tower, pouring a lot of money into that tower to try to convert it to a direct supervision model. And there are some compromises in doing that, but we could almost get there, and then adding the other components that we needed to that site, between $360 and $380 million. And these are very conceptual costs. There's nothing was designed at this point. And then we looked at option 1, and although this is slightly more than the option 4, this seemed to make the most sense. So what we heard back from the stakeholders group is that's really the direction we should head in, really start figuring out this facility, how could we really make this happen, and come back with some more ideas. So part of the evaluation of this also is phasing. So how do you actually renovate the tower facility, for example, while keeping inmates safe and keeping them housed? It would really extend out the duration of the project many more years than an all-new facility. So that increases the cost. And the unknown component for that facility as well, once you dig into things, as you know, there's always a surprise here or two, and I think you had some next door at the old tower next door, the admin building. Who knows what you'd find, but it's much simpler to build a new facility, quicker. We could build it all, move in, and then vacate and tear down the other facility.
In a 30-year life cycle of a building, capital cost is one component. Tends to be a smaller cost compared to the overall operating cost over that 30-year period. So we wanted to take an opportunity and look at staffing and what's going to be the anticipated staffing numbers within the sheriff's office for corrections deputy and command staff. We haven't looked at contractual services yet, medical, food services, mental health services. And so we wanted to do an apples-to-apples comparison between existing operations and proposed new operations in options 1 and 4. We kept at the heart of this staffing analysis the priority of improving inmate management and implementing direct supervision. We feel that it is important, regardless of the direction of the project, that direct supervision be implemented within the sheriff's office and within the jail to reduce risk and better manage the offender population. So the first step we took is that we looked at the current facility with no modifications whatsoever. And how do we better manage that facility, not making it direct supervision yet, but adding additional staff to better respond to inmate behavior and inmate issues. And what you'll see is that the current staffing number is 179, but our current need is 242 to make sure that inmates are protected and managed appropriately. But then we took it another step further and we said, okay, we really believe in direct supervision, and we want direct supervision to be the path forward. Curtis mentioned how the tower has some of the strongest limitations for managing inmate behavior. And so we said, what if we took the existing tower and converted it to a direct supervision model, meaning we have officers interacting with the offender population without barriers, managing their behavior, observing their behavior, and making appropriate responses to where they should be housed. And if we took the existing tower and the rest of the campus, didn't add any additional beds, and converted that to direct supervision, then the required number of staff is 339. Again, we haven't figured in contractual staff yet, but it's 339 in your existing facilities to implement direct supervision. Big numbers. Then we said, okay, let's look at options 1 and options 4. We know that option 1 is our recommended path forward, but let's take a look at a comparison between 1 and 4. 1 is the new facility adjacent to the existing structure, and at some point the existing structure is demolished, but it's brand new spaces, brand new housing areas, more responsive housing areas to the offender population. And option 4 is maintaining some of the existing structure, primarily the tower, and demolishing some of the other areas, but still keeping some parts of that and building some new areas, specifically the central intake and assessment. We also then looked at horizons in terms of how many beds will we have occupied at certain times. And we looked at 2 horizons. We looked at full capacity, 1672, and a earlier capacity of 1416, recognizing that at opening you may not have all of the beds occupied, and therefore you don't have to staff those areas. Option 1, brand new building, first phase, pardon me, of 1416, 238 corrections deputies and command staff. At full capacity, 1,672 inmates, 258 command and corrections deputy staff anticipated to manage that offender population. Option 4, which is maintaining part of the existing building, building new spaces, 261 employees at opening of 1416 inmates, and 279 employees, non-contractual, at full capacity of 1672. But here's the key to focus on. In option 1, we are adding 16% more capacity than your current facility, and we're more efficient. We're using it with 31% fewer staff. Doesn't mean less staff, but it's 31% fewer staff than if you stayed with the other options. That, to me, is the take-home message. Doesn't mean less staff. We have the right number of staff at the right time, at the right place, managing inmates appropriately. But option 1 becomes more efficient from a staffing model. Who's next?
Okay, so now we want to talk about the existing site a little bit, and we've made this recommendation, let's tear down the building, build a new building. Oh, how's this thing going to fit? Everybody's probably wondering, right? So this diagram is kind of hard to see, but on the right side, there's a dashed line. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. That's the current jail facility. The tower is kind of in this general area. There is an existing building over here, which is where the emergency operations used to be, and some warehouse space that I don't know is fully utilized anymore. And there's a dashed line right there, which is actually where the annex is currently sitting. So we would actually tear down that annex building to allow us to construct this new facility. So Elizabeth Road is off to the right, Dunham is on the top. The main entrance currently is right here at the bottom of the page, where you kind of turn in. Health Department is down below, Martha T. Berry down over here. So we kind of come in the same way. We'd have public parking where the current jail is currently sitting. So we have this new building constructed. We wouldn't have sufficient parking. We'd use other areas, and then it'd be sequenced appropriately to keep everybody safe, of course. But public parking is on the main side, Elizabeth Street side. There'd be some type of drop-off here, main entrance where this little red arrow is. All the staff parking would be secure back in this area, and we were hoping to use this section next to this building, and maybe this building doesn't have a future either, I don't really know, but We didn't want to suggest tearing it down just yet, but might be something to think about. One of the earlier slides was talking about future expansion of this jail. So all the infrastructure of this facility is sized for a greater population. And we have a design for, and it's not shown here, but there's another tower that we could construct where this parking is shown to accommodate future beds of 300-plus inmates. So there is thought to growth if need be. This could be, 30, 40 years down the road, but this plan will accommodate that for the long haul. I think that's about it on this site diagram. Oh, and the front of it here where the current jail is sitting, we would potentially propose a retention pond. We have to manage our stormwater. There are some severe stormwater issues currently with this site, so we're aware of those and we want to address those appropriately. We could also store that underground. It costs a lot more money to do that, so we'd really like to have a surface pond that is actually quite nice in appearance as well. So now we get into a proposed stacking diagram, and these aren't really meant to study each one of these. We're going to blow this up in a second. But these are the multiple floors of the tower of the whole building, actually, starting with the basement on the left side, all the way up to the 9th floor at the top. So basement, first floor. Price is going to walk us through this diagram on the next slide here.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for hosting us today. Just a little bit backwards for a moment. In thinking about the way the building works and the way the site works, we've also zoned it in a way that is, Mike described to you, we have our public parking here, we have our staff parking here, we have all of our detainee arrivals coming through here, and we have all of our service vehicles coming into here. So we've been able to zone this site so we reduce any site conflicts and movement issues, which is, again, an improvement on the site. We'll start to look at this building, and we're going to see it in 3D in a moment. But we have put into the tower all of the housing, all of our general population housing, our males, our females. We've centralized our medical housing and medical programs on the 2nd and 3rd floors, put our intake, our public elements on the 1st floor with our security operations, and then located in the basement those sort of functional utility operations like the kitchen, the laundry, and the warehouse. So let's take a look at how that actually stacks up. And we've taken that and start to thinking in 3 dimensions now, and you can start to see what I just talked about. We've got a series of floors that are organized around a central core. That core links them all together. That's a series of elevators. The spaces then radiate off of that. We have our housing on the top tiers, males, females. We have a core of medical services and medical housing. And then on top of that, our base level here, we have our public lobby, our intake, our security operations, and our administrative operations, all there serving the public with a court option and the programs and services, again, below grade in that basement. We're not going to get into this in a great deal today, but we want to let you know that more than just dealing with colored boxes right now, we have been broken this down, and we are dealing in a room-by-room basis and are starting to lay out each of these floors with a functional operation of how it works. We've spent an enormous amount of time and appreciate the input from the Sheriff's Department. They have been terrific clients, and they are thoughtful and excited about this process, and we are making this further develop. So we are fairly confident, in fact, we are very confident that the stacking diagrams we showed you are going to be operational and work with the program that Curtis and Jim talked about. Here is a typical housing floor on those upper floors, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 housing units around a core of program space with that vertical circulation core there. And this gets back to that element that Jim and Curtis were talking about, the mini jail and the direct supervision, that when we can have a base and a mezzanine level of housing like this around a central core space, that core space has the basic programs and services that those detainees need and participate in on a daily basis, reducing the amount of movement, making this a safer and more efficient facility to operate. Again, that's the concept of the mini jail that stacks up. How does it look when we start to put it onto the site and think about it? Well, as we take that site plan, and Mike pointed out to you, we have our staff, or excuse me, our public parking here, our staff parking back there, but now we're going to have a tower of housing on top of a 2-story base with a forecourt that addresses out to Elizabeth Street and onto Dunham Road, and then more utility elements back towards your warehouse and services building. So we've taken that core space. We have outdoor recreation on each of these. We have some articulation that allows all the rooms to get lots of daylight and natural light through into those spaces, but again, becoming an important civic building for Macomb County. And we've even gone a little bit further out on the limb and tried to take a little artist's architectural conception about what this building can be. And our vision, I think all of us share this vision, that this is going to be an important civic building for Macomb County. It not only houses a jail, it's your public safety building with the sheriff. It has courts. It has public amenity spaces. We see again, the 2-story base here with a lot of glazing and a very open space with a large forecourt and the public parking. And again, those towers back behind, not looking like the jail, but looking like a civic building. Sure.
Yep, all right. Well, this is our presentation. I know I've spoken to you over the past couple of months on some of the directions in which we were going to go, and really the key here to make some changes, we definitely need to make some changes, is to move to this direct supervision model. And how we get there, the best way to get there, we've just presented this to you. 2 weeks ago, I worked 24 hours. We have a training day where everybody works, and I met with all of my staff on all 3 shifts and kind of gave them a heads up before I came here publicly and put this in front of you and of the public. And again, the staff is behind us. I don't think there was one person that came forward that said, you know, this is a bad idea, you're going to put us in jeopardy. They're ready for some change. To be honest, they're proud of where they work, but when they go out into the community and some people find out where they work, you know, comments come at them about things that are happening in the jail, and they're all committed to put an end to that. So we're here. We will take questions, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sheriff. Okay, I do have a list of commissioners with questions. The chair at this time is going to recognize Commissioner Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. The first one's more of a housekeeping question, either for the chair or for staff. Is there a reason why we don't have the presentation with our agendas on our iPads? I asked this for my future questions coming up. It'd make it easier.
We didn't finish it up until this afternoon.
Okay.
We've been working on it the last 2 days, so I do
Thank you,
apologize.
Sheriff.
We will get you a copy of it.
Thank you.
In other words, it wasn't our fault.
Even better.
I'm always to blame.
All right, Sheriff, I'm looking at you. So I asked that question because there's a lot of numbers being thrown around with population, beds, projections, all that good stuff. So when we spoke previously, I think the count was going to be, it was 1,672 beds with the option for 304 in the future, correct?
Correct.
So that's 1976, if my math is accurate. In a projection for 2040, it was somewhere around 2,000 inmates, is that correct?
I think it was originally around 1,700 and some.
Okay.
The 2,000 came as if we don't do anything, we don't make changes from a jail perspective and from a criminal justice perspective, and that's including the prosecutor's office, the courts,
Mental health.
you know, and just keep sending people to jail. And as this the population of the county grows, you're going to need over 2,000 beds to handle what the analysis.
Okay.
That's what they looked at.
That's where my math was getting fuzzy. We have, you know, projected to be at 2,000, but we only have 1,900 beds, and that's with the addition, which also will take time to build once we need it, correct?
Correct.
So I was trying to mash all those numbers together to see if that made sense, and was going to ask you if you're comfortable with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, the last thing I want to do is give you a number and start the work, and then the day it opens up, we're overcrowded.
That's because by the time we break ground, construction starts and finishes, we're already, you know, 5 years from now into it, which leaves 15 years or so with the facility, so that's why I was
Yes.
curious. Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. At this point, Commissioner Kraft. I'm sorry, Commissioner Romano.
Kraft's over there. Hi, Sheriff. Hi. I got to commend the presentation. I mean, it's mind-boggling. It really is. You look at all the numbers. I'll tell you. Let me tell you the positive things of what I'm looking at here. First of all, the safety aspect, which is tantamount. You've got to have the safety for you guys, for the women too, that work in these facilities. And if we can make it safer for them by the virtue of this projection of you coming up with this jail, I'm totally in favor of that. I'm a little concerned with the fact that, I shouldn't say concerned, I think I'm a little, I approve the idea of having that additional space available alongside the building if I looked at the diagram correctly, that in the future we could add to that without going through what we're doing now, which is tearing down and then adding again, tearing down again. We could put to this facility in addition, if in fact we needed it, without too much problems, because I'm sure that they would do that in the diagramming of it. The open area that we're talking about, that you would be utilizing, and I think that's part of the tower thing. My concern would be, with all these prisoners milling about, and I mean, it looks like an open area where everybody has access to everybody. Where's the safety in that? I'm talking about for the deputies.
It's controlling and managing the behavior. Again, this is where it's coming into the direct supervision. You've seen the areas that it came on. The inmate that's out there, not that we're going to coddle them, not that we're going to, give them a better place, but, we've got to manage the behavior, and to manage the behavior is having them in a better environment. And again, if they don't behave, then they're going to be moved to a part of the facility where they're going to be locked down, and they're not going to come out. And again, statistically, the information is out there. Again, my experts are back here. They can tell you that, it changes behavior. The site tours that we went on, we spoke to the line staff, the officers that are working in there. And again, I'll tell you, there's one gentleman that was I think it was in Syracuse, was there for 25 years, and they started direct supervision about 24 years ago. And he said, 3 of his friends quit because they did not want to be in direct contact with inmates. He stayed, and he said that's the best thing that's ever happened. Again, it's a philosophy change. Again, I brought it up to my staff and told them, look, if we're going to make some changes here, we have to go to direct supervision. And again, I challenged them to do their research. My door is always open. My phone is always on. If you want to discuss it, you want to tell me I'm going in the wrong direction, I'm always available, and I haven't got a call yet. Okay, maybe after I said that, my phone will start ringing, but we have to make change. That was going to be my always going to be my comment.
My last question was regarding the processing center. This 24/7, how is this going to be manned? I mean, you're talking at 3:30 in the morning, you're bringing in prisoners.
So we have our staff is there 24/7. Again, expanding the community corrections aspect of it. They're the pretrial experts, so they can get up to these inmates and start assessing them and giving the judges good information so they can make informative decisions on whether the individual needs to stay.
You say trial experts. I'm sorry to interrupt you. What does that mean?
So it's prior to the trial, prior to being arraigned, right, that they can assess them. Most judges, when they go to arraign a defendant, they're looking maybe at a warrant. They may look at a criminal history, but that's all really the information. In some cases, there may be a detective that gives input, or there may be a prosecutor that gets input. Obviously, now there's going to be attorneys present to champion for release. But a judge has to make, or a magistrate has to make a decision on, if I put this person back out in the community, is the community going to be safe? And a lot of times, judges err on the side of caution, higher bonds, maybe no bonds, just to ensure that the community is going to be safe. With pretrial services, as soon as the individual comes in, community corrections is assessing them, talking to them, looking at additional history, other incarcerations that they may have had in the facility, maybe other contacts. What is their issue? Is it substance abuse? Is it mental health? Maybe they're not taking their pills. That's all information that when that individual goes in front of a judge or magistrate, they can make a better decision on whether they need to stay in jail or whether they can be released or diverted somewhere else.
Thank you, Sheriff. Again, excellent presentation by your team back there. Thank you. That's all I have.
You're welcome. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Chair. And Tony, thank you for the presentation. This is the one we had previously reviewed with you. And during the review, I remember Commissioner Carabelli indicating, make sure we have the staffing numbers, whether they increase and to what extent. I heard 2 or 3 times, and maybe it's premature at this point, but there wasn't any indication of the contractual employees or cost at that point. So I would suggest when we have another shot at this, that be included.
You'll have it.
And secondly, I want to congratulate you and the team on comprehending the future. So we're not sitting here, somebody said 30 years, I'm more concerned about 10 years, looking at what to do with it. A quick question, while, let's assume, construction's taking place, is there any estimate of how long it would take to construct the schematic that was presented to us? And 2, what do you do with the offender population while construction's going on? And offender population was your term.
Yep. That population stays in the current facility, and we continue to operate until a new facility is built, and then we move them over. And gentlemen, somebody from the construction side, it's about a 3-year build? Mike said 3.
That's assuming there are no major issues at that time.
Exactly.
And when we originally saw the presentation, you had spoke about housing, I want to use that right term, offender population from other communities instead of having the communities having to house the population. Has that been pursued further?
Yeah, again, the original, and what we're talking about is central intake. And talking to the other law enforcement agencies, we went out and during the assessment, all of the police agencies in Macomb County were approached and asked about central intake and whether they would want to participate. We have currently our agency, Shelby Township and Utica, are piloting that. All arrests are coming in, and we're doing kind of this mini assessment with the 41A District Court up there in Shelby Township. I know I've had commitments from Roseville. I've had commitments from Chesterfield Township. They're all on board and closing their lockups and bringing the prisoners in. During the original process, Sterling Heights was not interested, but they have new leadership, and we are giving them the information. So, again, if Field of Dreams, if you build it, they may come. It's something that, you know, as a county organization, you know, we should be offering up to our locals. You know, we'll have the expertise, the care, the custody, the processing. It would help out the courts with the arraignment and this Michigan Indigent Defense Council with attorneys being present. And for those lockups that have police officers watching prisoners, put those police officers back out in the streets.
And each one of those attributes, when we saw it originally, were cost savings to the local municipalities.
They would certainly be.
Great.
Cost savings or enhanced security for those communities.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Commissioner Dujay.
Thank you very much. Good presentation, Sheriff. Well done.
Thank them.
Couple of things. It was a toss-up between 1 and 3. I really liked the idea of putting it next to the court. But I also recognize the problems that that was going to produce as far as parking and so on and everything else involved in that. But I think this looks very, very promising. Question: Are you counting on the judges keeping up their bed allotment the way they're doing now? Is that entering into it, or are the judges going to have?
You know, we would like
the mechanics of it.
We would like to do away with that. We would like
right.
the fact that they would be able to manage that population.
All right.
again, I've addressed with you for some time, over the last couple of months, our numbers have been low.
Right.
So each judge knows that there's room. So I think the judges are also doing a good job of looking at who needs to be in jail.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to flow up and down along with the population of the county growing bigger.
Exactly.
I like that suicide and narcotics watch, that you're addressing that when they're coming in. The annex was always interesting because that's where they were bagging all the lunches when the kitchen went down.
It became the kitchen.
I also like the fact that we're keeping 24-hour operations together. I think that's important. The JJC, the jail, the JJC, and Martha T. Berry and the coroner, keeping all of them together kind of makes it makes sense to me. Video intake is going to be a very important part of all this, I imagine.
Yeah, if you look at one of the slides where it gives you the 18 things, it'll say court and technology. That video is a big part of that.
And last, the question that I have is on the schematic, all the cells had one of the walls on all the cells was connected to outside. Are you going to be using insulation? Are we going to get a lot of heat loss or air conditioning loss through the walls the way it was designed? And I don't know who to ask for that.
You are correct in noting that every cell did have an exterior window.
Yeah.
But all of the exterior walls and the windows would conform with the contemporary energy standards for insulation, heat loss, heat gain, and high-performance envelopes. So the envelope will be designed to be an efficient envelope.
Okay, I noticed that, and just by looking at it,
Sure.
it bothered me. But you guys have done your homework, very impressive. Thank you very much, and continue.
You're welcome. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sheriff. Thank you. What is the anticipated life expectancy of the option one proposal, I guess the new building proposal? 30 years, 35, 25, 40?
50 years.
50 years? Okay. And just a quick note, I didn't realize direct supervision. I anticipated that meant line of sight. I didn't realize it meant throwing the officer in the middle of the prisoners. But I appreciate that clarification that came from Commissioner Romano's question. But 50 years is the anticipated life expectancy of the proposal.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Some of this has been answered already, but how this new jail will help the average resident, how will the average resident see the benefit to them personally in their neighborhoods? They'll see, the taxpayers could see that some of the communities are participating in the central intake with all the savings available to them by basically partnering. But can you speak to that?
Right. And the goal is, number one, is once somebody gets arrested, is to find out why they got arrested, why they're doing what they're doing. Again, is it mental health? Is it substance abuse? Is it alcohol? And get them to that treatment or divert them to where they can get help so that when they do get back out into the community, they're not committing the crimes. If they get incarcerated and they're going to stay in jail, we got to be able to have programs. We got to try and change behavior. We got to get them ready so when they do go out into the community, again, as you heard, most of them are citizens of Macomb County, that when they get back out, they're not going to reoffend. We're at about a 70% recidivism rate within the 2 years. 70% of the people walking out the front door are coming back in. So we've got to work on that. And the only way we can work on that is programs. And again, we don't have a good program model currently at the jail. We just don't have the space at this time.
Central booking is not presently done now, so if someone's arrested in Warren, they put them in the Warren holding tank.
Right.
What's the capacity of the Warren jail down there?
I think it's 50.
50?
Yep. And again, it's something that, they all know. I meet with all the chiefs at least once a week and once a month at our meetings, and again, they're all on board. They understand the concept. It's open to them all. If they want to participate, love to have them. We all have to work together in this issue.
There's we've got some time to work on those negotiations, just like we did with Comtech, right?
We'll have a lot of time, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Commissioner Lucido.
Thank you. Hi, Tony, nice to see you. Good presentation. My question was, one of the options shown was the court, having the court there, and we had talked previously about there being a magistrate, just to kind of quicken things up rather than transporting people.
Yep.
What's the deciding factor, whether we do that or not?
You know, that's still going to be a negotiation with the courts. Again, we have judges or magistrates that come in and do the weekend and holiday arraignments. Again, having a court facility and at least maybe either at the circuit court and doing some of the circuit court arraignments, whether we do it by video or somebody comes here. You know, that's still part of the negotiation that we have to have with the bench. We don't have 100% commitment yet. There was one facility that had a 24-hour magistrate. There was always a judge, what was it? Arlington, Virginia, 24/7, had a magistrate in there, so right when they came in, the magistrate made the decision on whether they get an appearance ticket and come back to court, or they get into the jail. Controls the population.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Kleinfeld.
Thank you, Chair. I used to live in Arlington, so if their income to the county is based on property values, then they're just drenched in money because it's ridiculous there. I didn't go to any of the presentations that you gave, and the reason I didn't is, and I'm hoping you'll take this into consideration in the future, every time we have a big project, whether it's you or the executive's office or anybody else, we tend to do these group meetings. And what I'd like to see this board start doing is workshops, where we're not at this formal table, we're in the conference room, sitting around a table, having this conversation with everybody together, as opposed to in separate meetings. So just keep that in mind. I think it would save time for you. You don't have to make the same presentation 10 times. And we would all be able to hear what everybody else has to say. As long as we post it, we're allowed to do that.
Okay.
So having not seen the presentation, obviously the increase in staff just hit me like a ton of bricks because I wasn't expecting it. And I agree with everything you're saying. I think this is all necessary and wonderful. I mean, I've watched jail. I see how the intake in nicer facilities are. I don't know how we're going to fund it with not just Macomb County, but our state's set up for revenue. It sets us up to not be able to succeed in things like this.
Right.
So I'm sure that's something that's on your mind, and I'm hoping you're going to have some idea with respect to the positions. I know you'll have some idea with respect to the jail itself, but we just recently added quite a few positions in your department. We didn't have any extra income source. This particular amount of new positions, we won't survive if we don't find some way to offset it. And there may be ideas out there. I mean, there's one that I have, I don't want to mention up here, we'll talk about it, but that's just letting you know, that's a huge concern for me. I don't want to preside over the county going into a deficit during good times. How can I explain that? So the other thing is, when you first started talking about this a couple years ago, I asked you a question and you looked at me like I was from outer space. And the question was, and I don't know where Wayne County is, if they finished building their new jail. The question was, why is it in all other areas that we're quick to look at working with each other, but counties can't get together when it comes to something as expensive as this? And like what I was suggesting to you is, if there's two counties that need a jail, why isn't it a Code County jail? And You looked at me like I was crazy, so I'm just wondering why.
I don't have that answer. Obviously, inmates are remanded to the care and custody of the county sheriff. So putting them together, I don't know if that would cause problems. Again, Oakland County just built, they did some additions. St. Clair County just built a new jail. You got transportation issues. You've got, work issues. Are employees going to want, if you partnered with Wayne County, employees going to want to go downtown and watch prisoners down there. There's a lot of issues.
Okay, but
I
it
just-
should be a discussion, because if we can't fund those extra, extra guards and
Sure.
extra personnel, then at some point, there's got to be a discussion about those types of things. So, all right, that's all
Yep.
I have.
I still look
And I
at
do
you like I
support it.
don't have
I
it.
want to support it, but there's just no way if I
Right.
can't find a funding source for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So far, great questions by the commissioners. I've been talking to the sheriff, and thank you, Sheriff Wickersham and staff and everybody for the presentation. These are conversations about partnering up with other jails that we've had these conversations.
Commissioner, would you speak to the microphone? Thank you.
And with that said, it does come down to one of the problems we have with manpower is the transportation of these prisoners to and from these courts, to and from other facilities. So when you're looking to going to a county boundary line, these were discussions that I've had for 10 years now on what could we do, buying maybe a jail that they closed down possibly on 26 Mile Road and the expressway. Is there a possibility, get it for free? There's a lot of different things they're looking at, and I know you have looked at them, because we've talked about at least 4 or 5 different options. So with that said, I know you've done your due diligence, and you have looked, though it's not as easy as Commissioner had explained, because by law, our county is responsible to have a jail. It's not an option. We are mandated to have a jail. With that said, we need to have a functioning jail. I don't want to spend any of the taxpayers' dollars, but at the end of the day, we have a responsibility that we have to provide. So with that said, my questions are not going to be able to answer, I'm guessing, today, but I'm going to throw these out there. There's a lot of great things that your staff and the staff that you have assembled to work with you on this project came up with, from mental health to central booking to the courts and the procedures and going in. Well, that's all going to require buy-in. And all that together, before you can build a jail, we'd have to have some kind of commitment of, is everybody going to buy into this? Are the judges going to buy into this? Are all these ancillary groups that were putting prisoners in there and taking prisoners, how are we going to lock down the buy-in? So that's a question I guess I need some offline feedback from you to get an understanding of. The next thing we go into, from community corrections, mental health, the courts buy-in, and then it was brought up about the video court. How can we maximize our benefit of the video courts with the courts buying in to do that? That all, at the end of the day, saves the taxpayers' dollars long-term in this process. But how do we hold accountability to the people that you can't control? They're outside organizations. But at the end of the day, it affects all of our taxpayers. So the sheriff can't make the judge do X, Y, or Z. So the point is that how can we mandate that they work together to save our taxpayers' dollars? And I don't have the answer to that, and I don't know if you do as well. But these are serious concerns that need to be addressed. I also, I brought up before, and it was touched on, and Commissioner, maybe I'm wrong, I don't have the numbers to flip back through this, but if we were running at full capacity and he manned up in the jail, not to direct supervision, I believe that you would have less officers in the new facility than you do if you were fully manned in the old facility. Am I incorrect to that, or am I correct?
248 and 2, yes, by 1 or 2.
So
And
we're,
opening capacity of the 1412.
so the adding of manpower to the new facility, if you were fully manned in the old facility, I believe it's actually a couple less, if I'm not mistaken. So I wanted to clarify that.
Right.
Okay.
No, and I think for point of interest, as it relates to the jail, and I talked about this in the budget last year when I asked for additional, the Macomb County Jail, when it opened up the tower in 1987, was never properly staffed. Whoever was doing the calculations didn't have the expertise that I have here today. And again, we've always worked for the last 30-some years that, and I started in 1986, that it's cheaper to pay the overtime than it is to hire the proper staff. And I know I came in front of you last year to say, well, it's good to get overtime because it's extra money, but this new generation doesn't want to work overtime, I should say. So really what we're doing is we're trying to play. I grew up with this group.
So with that said, so those are some of the things, and I just wanted to clarify that point. So, and I brought up about manpower, and I talked about operational expense, and I said, I know it's going to be difficult, but F&O needs to get with you. I'd like to see what we say are operational costs, not manpower, to running the current facility the way it is. So dollars and cents for my electricity, to my water, to my maintenance, everything we have, I'd like to know what that number is, and I'd like to know what the cost is going to be of a new facility. And I know it's not going to be an exact to the penny, but with all LEDs and just everything that's new, the savings should be there. And I'd like to see this is what we're currently paying today, and this is what we anticipate the future cost to be here. So it would just help me formulate a decision on that. And nothing against the architectural firm. This is not personal. This is just coming from me as one commissioner. That was a beautiful design. I like the round building thought on the outside, but at the end of the day, this is a jail facility, and I'm looking at a square building. If it's cheaper to build, and I'm going to ask the taxpayers to pay for some of this, I'd rather see the most cost-effective building we can do that we get the full functionality of what you need, and maybe the round sketch to me may be something that isn't totally necessary. So again, nothing personal. I'm not looking for glazed tiles on the inside. I don't care if they're cinder block. Again, I'm only one commissioner. I can't, listen, and I'm just one person.
Yeah, no, and if you looked at it, most of it is square when you look at it. The only thing that's circle is that court aspect out front. So pop that court out, everything's.
Make it square.
It's square.
I'll feel better.
Yes.
Now, the next question is, the way this was designed, it looked like you had a female floor and then male floors. Is that the way I was understanding that?
Yes.
Okay, entire floors. Now, does that have the availability of saying I needed to, say, take a floor and make it 2 female floors instead of 1 because of your population? You make those changes, correct?
Yes, we do that now. We move inmates.
And a sensitive subject, and I'm just asking because I don't know. Any of the facilities that you've looked at and visited or researched, have any of them had a wing attachment or a floor to the juvenile?
St. Clair County started out as a combined facility. I don't know if they still are.
No.
No, we're taking theirs straight. Okay, I wanted to ask that question because I'm trying to think long-term.
Yep.
All right. Now, the other question is I'm sure everybody's aware of the Michigan State Industries. Michigan State Industries is the prison industries where they legitimately, you ever want to buy a nice American flag made in the prison? I mean, there's some good quality stuff at a very reasonable price. I don't know if it's legal to put your prisoners to work. Can they make a widget and in return help offset any cost? I don't know the answers to this stuff, but I'm sure I'm going to be asked it. If I thought of it, somebody else is going to ask. It's just something to talk about. The last thing I want to ask is when we talk about paying for this, there's going to be a lot of options, and I guess I'll defer to the chair to ask your next steps going forward. We'd like to hear the thought process from the Finance Department, from yourself, and from the board of your next step in this process, minus the round building and all the other stuff I mentioned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're all set? Okay. All right.
Don't cut them off.
I'm teasing you. Commissioner Sauger.
It just won't take long. I was working over there when that thing was constructed. You know, so you know it's been a while.
You were in charge of the staffing, and I know that.
You got a great staff behind you, Tony. A great staff. I know most of them. But this is well needed. And I hope everybody supports this idea. It's got to be built. You got to maintain security in this county. And long after I'm gone, I wish I could see the ending of it, but you need it. And good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, members of the board, this is what I would like to do. we've got a couple people. I've got a question, and then we've got Don Brown on the second round. What I'd like to do is, we've got a couple other department heads here that I'd like to try to get out of here if we could. Most notably, the prosecutor's office. They've been sitting back there, and we've got Steve Schmiegel from Finance. With a motion, if permissible under the rules, I would like to jump ahead on the budget, put you on hold for a second, Sheriff, and jump ahead and move down to discuss, if we could, items 8C, D, E, F, and G.
I move that we approve in entirety.
For C, D, E, F, and G?
Yes.
Any discussion on that?
Support.
Or support, okay. Yeah, that would be for all of them. Okay,
That's the question.
go ahead. What's your question, Commissioner Kleinfeld?
C actually is the body armor, which is him, isn't it?
That would be correct. And actually, the sheriff is on the rest of them, but we can maybe get some of those deputies out.
Okay, my question was on the body armor. I know that we're not going out to bid. It's not because it's a sole source provider, it's because of the working relationship or something, which surprised me because this is a physical item. And so, but I did look online and I know that we're getting a good price. So I'm not going to protest it, but I would like to in the future keep in mind when we say we have a continuing on working relationship with somebody, it's usually because they have detailed or intimate knowledge about our facilities or our computer systems or something, and this is the purchase of an item that wouldn't require that. So just keep that in mind in the future, and also looking at the changes in designs from other companies, and you might find something that you like at a less expensive price, but I'm not going to hold this purchase up. I did have a question, though. I noticed that it was just like one invoice, 111 in the price, and I didn't see a breakdown for male and female. Are there different types being purchased for male and female? I know that they have different types.
Yes, there are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other, Commissioner Gillette?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, in regard to the body armor, our material says that the current vests have reached the end of their useful life after 5 years of service. So what kind of wear and tear ends up on body armor aside from hopefully not being shot at? But, I mean, the useful life of body armor is essentially 5 years?
Based on the composition of the body armor, absolutely. When you're wearing your body armor, it's next to your body, you're sweating on it every day, you're moving around in it, it gets beat up.
Okay, so you just can't dry clean that, I suppose?
No, you don't,
But,
no, you don't dry clean body armor.
Okay, so 5 years is useful life expectancy of body armor?
Industry standard, yes, 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and again, Commissioners, I'll remind you, these are any questions for items 8C through G. We do have the clerk's office here, and we have the prosecutor's office here. Okay, Commissioner Carabelli?
For Steve, if you got a minute. Item G, is this for one fund, or is this for 4 funds, or 3 funds? Is this just one account you're setting up right now?
Yeah, item G is relative to the prosecutor's forfeiture fund that we're all well aware of now. So this is putting this on the books for the first time. And it's relative to the drunk driving portion of that fund. So there's a drunk driving forfeiture fee that is collected, and there's drug forfeiture as well. This is
Okay, so you're just
specific to
you're bringing one forward right now. I just want to.
Pardon?
Is it my understanding it's just one of them coming forward right now?
Yeah, this is the drunk driving only for the remainder of the year. The revenue is based on an average of the last 2 years, based on analysis of the bank statements, and then I think the explanations and allocations to the different line items, I think is fairly self-explanatory. If not, Mr. Langtree will provide any kind of detail.
It's all self-explanatory. I guess you're going to bring the other ones at a later date then?
Yeah, we'll work with the prosecutor's office. This is the one with the most activity in it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Schmiegel. Anybody else have any questions on items 8C through G for any of the department heads that are here? Okay, we do have a motion, and it's been seconded, so let's put it to vote. motion passes 12-0, but I want to make it clear here, is that was just for item 8C. The motion was for all the items in their entirety, if I understand it correctly. Okay, very well. Came up a little different on the computer, but as long as the minutes reflect that, then I'm happy. Okay, let's get back to you, Sheriff. Sorry. It should be real quick.
Brain trust right here.
Yeah, well, you know what, I do have a question. Commissioner Brown, you withdraw for, okay, so we're still on the first round, and I haven't had a chance to ask a question, so I am going to ask a question. Mr. Robertson, I'm going to have you come up, if you can. First of all, I do want to say the same thing the other commissioners that iterate, that it was an excellent presentation. I appreciate the fact that you looked at different options, you looked at different scenarios, and you maximized the best efficiency that we could get and the cost that we could get. So I know, as the sheriff said, there was a lot of brain trust and a lot of brains behind it, and I want to commend you for doing that. Mr. Robertson, I do have a question here. I did pull this 2016 report that you gave us a little while back. And there's two theories here, which is essentially bringing us here today. One theory is direct supervision, and the other theory is central intake. In your report, and I'm not criticizing you, but I don't recall, the main thing I remembered about your report was central intake. We have to have a central intake. We have to make sure we assess people from the beginning. And that deals with, in a sense, keeping people, I guess, out of the jail if we don't need them in there. And that's very important. I looked through this real quick because I never remembered the concept of direct supervision. Was that addressed in this report at all?
No, that report focused, it may have been on the surface in addressing the central intake and assessment process, but that report focused primarily on the criminal justice system as a whole. The recommendation to go forward with the two brought us to the point of deciding to implement direct supervision.
Okay, and that's what I want most people to understand, is that initially we had a meeting about this about a year ago. It was a lot of talk about central intake and other factors. The idea of direct supervision sort of came about in the last year, and we're about to vote on some items here, and I think that's part of the reason is that we're now looking at a direct supervision theory. Now let me ask you this question, and again, both theories I totally support. But if we were going to be dealing with limited means, limited space, limited brick and mortar, the question I have, and you can answer it or you can answer it, Sheriff, or any one of the folks back there with the brain power, if we were limited in brick and mortar, limited in resources, what theory should we put as a priority? Should it be central intake or should it be direct supervision? Which theory should we have first if we get limited in what we have to do here?
Boy, that is a... You want me to take a stab? Or
You go first.
Okay, let me...
One is central intake, and two is direct supervision.
I don't think it's an either or option. And let me defend why. Direct supervision is a management philosophy that allows you to minimize the risks that you currently have in your facility. I would offer that if you chose to not do any of these and stick with your current facility, you still implement direct supervision. And that was that high staff number of 339. So direct supervision allows the sheriff to better control, manage, respond to the inmate population. Central intake and assessment leads into direct supervision. Direct supervision starts there, and it continues throughout the rest of the inmate's incarceration. But for me, it's not an either-or option. It's well, I'll leave it at that.
I get what you're saying.
I'll leave that and see if the sheriff wants to put that cleanup.
I get it. It's a blended, you want a blended approach, and I completely understand that, completely understand it. Again, I just wanted to have that question answered, because it is the two theories, central intake and direct supervision, that has brought us here today, and we're about to vote on these next two items, 8A and 8B, with the design, taking those two important theories into consideration. So, again, the question was a hypothetical question in case somehow or another we were limited in resources and space. So your answer is it's not an either-or question, unless, Sheriff, you got something to add to that.
No, I would concur with Jim, but I think the direct supervision is really the key to change. Again, when I addressed the staff, I analyzed it or presented it this way: when you have indirect supervision, we go back there once an hour. Once every 50-some minutes. Those doors open, those doors close. Officers check on the inmates, doors are slamming. The inmates know when the officers are coming, and they know when the officers are gone. So if they want to do something bad, and again, doing it that indirect supervision, we're complying with MDOC and laws of proper supervising inmates. That's when the bad things happen. You know, I'm always asked, what are you going to do about the suicides? How are you going to prevent the suicides? Well, we got to go to direct supervision, because you saw the statistics on the mental health, right? Mental health and on suicide watch, shame on my staff and myself if somebody can commit suicide while on suicide watch. But those are the people that aren't committing suicide. The people committing suicide are up in that tower that don't present, that don't say that they have a problem. There's no indication. They go upstairs. They think their life is over with. They know when the officer's coming. They know when the officer's leaving. And then they take their life. That's the one I have to answer to all the time. So I'd be leaning more towards direct supervision, so I'm not in the paper all the time on issues that are occurring in that jail.
Okay, I get it. So if we were limited in space, we'd want to design the jail to accommodate direct supervision as opposed to like an area for central intake. You feel it would be direct supervision. And that's fair. That's a fair enough answer. Okay, Commissioner Brown, are you back on? You're withdrawn? Okay, Commissioner Kleinfeld on the second round.
Oh, this will just take me a second. The reference to the way the facility is currently needing more staff is based on the 1693 number, correct? It's based on the future expectations. What's full capacity now?
If we had the full campus opened up, it would be 1,438 inmates.
1438 today?
1,438. And we have 179. That's corrections and command to manage 1,438 inmates.
If we were at 1438, you're saying the number would be higher?
Yes,
Or were you going on the 1693, the projections?
No.
The current need in your current facility with no modifications, no changes, current rated capacity is 242 staff.
Okay, I wrote down 238, so...
238 is the new facility, option one.
Okay,
So
242.
Somebody asked a question earlier about whether there was less staff in option one than it is in your current need, and it is, with pretty similar rated capacity.
Okay. I was surprised that the projections went up as much as it did, because I thought we're trying to get a diversion. We're trying to find out ways to not incarcerate nonviolent offenders. So it's just surprising to me that the numbers always go up, even though we're going towards a philosophy of having things go down. That's disheartening to me. I'm not blaming that on you guys, but that's disheartening to me. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other speakers. I want to thank you folks again for coming in, Sheriff. I think it was an excellent presentation. I want to thank that brain power behind you there as well for what they did. And we've already had this as accepted as a motion to receive and file. So at this point, we're going to move on to item 8A and B. I'd like to do it as both. Oh, we didn't vote for it. I'm sorry. Let's vote to accept and receive and file, or receive and file. There you go. Okay, the motion to accept and receive passes 12-0. Okay, moving on, I'd like to tether 8A and B together. The reason why I want to do this is A is for the schematic design. It's an increase of $720,000, and then B is the contract for that same design. So, Sheriff, go ahead.
Okay, well, when we started this project, the RFP went out, and it was for a facility. I think it was up to $175 million, I think $200 million. And when we put this out, honestly thought that we would be able to save that tower, repurpose that tower, and put it to good use. And throughout this project, you've seen the problems with the tower that are occurring and that we still have to get in there and fixed. We looked at the costs of what it would be to repurpose that tower, and with the unknown of what we might find. Also, where are we going to have to put the prisoners as we're moving along? I just felt with our team, that building a whole new facility was the way to go. Obviously, with that, the scope of services has always doubled, and Partners and Architect, and rightfully so, is asking for additional funding to get us to schematic design. To get us to schematic design, when we come back in May, not only will we have all the questions that you have asked me to bring forward, we are going to have a hard number as a construction cost and also a operational cost, so that this board can make an informative decision for the approval and then funding options.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think this is to the sheriff necessarily, but does it make sense for us to put more money into developing a schematic design and developing the architecture of the facility when we don't have any plan on how we're going to end up paying for the facility yet? Would it make more sense for us to hold off on putting any more money into fleshing out the design, fleshing out the details, putting together all the proposals, if we don't really know if we're even going to build the facility because we don't know how we're going to pay for it?
It's a fair question to the chair. I guess if I may, with your permission, may I ask the sheriff a question or anybody behind him?
Please.
Okay. If you followed my earlier line of questionings, I asked if we're limited by means of space and resources, and we got these two theories, direct supervision, which the sheriff really advocates for, and central intake, which Mr. Robertson has presented quite well. He would like to blend it. The sheriff says if I have to make a choice, it's going to be direct supervision. I guess my question to you, Sheriff, or anybody behind him, is this, along with what Commissioner Drollet is saying. In these additional funds we're going to give you to come up with a schematic, is there going to be alternatives that we would be able to fall back on in case resources in both brick and mortar and, let's say, money are not available? In other words, I have no problem giving these folks extra money today as long as they're going to come back with some nice, neat options that say, look, if the funding comes up short, we can do this and implement direct supervision. We can do this and we can blend central intake and direct supervision. We're giving you these funds. It's kind of like I'm saying, if I'm gonna buy your services, how many different options are you going to give me with this extra money I give you?
Thank you. Mike?
I'll try to answer that. If that's the direction we're getting, that's what we'll come back with. And, our goal is to provide a definitive, project definition. Right now we have concepts and there's some plans that look like they're worked out, which they're pretty well worked out, but there's a lot of more detail that we need to make sure we're, addressing all the concerns of the program and the sheriff's operations.
Yeah.
If you're going to tell us, come back with, different cost models or different approaches on how to achieve the total goal, we'll have to do that. I don't really know what that means just yet. We can't really build half a tower. We can't really, and one of the reasons why we're not recommending renovating the tower or even considered keep the tower and don't do anything and then let's build this other thing, but that doesn't really give you a wholesale change that's going to, meet the long-term needs of the county.
So understand from the commissioner's perspective, if we give you the $775,000 that we're talking about here additionally, it seems it's coming at it from hold on.
720, please don't give
720, you got
asking
it.
for.
Sorry.
I apologize.
If we give you this additional money, it seems like what Commissioner Drollet's worried about is that we're giving it to you with the idea that that beautiful project where we're going to tear down the one over there and build up the other one on the other side is what you're going to be designing it for. And I think his concern is we don't know if we have the funds available to do that yet. And that's not going to necessarily come from us. That's going to maybe have to come from the citizens of Macomb County. And all I care about, if I'm buying your services as a commissioner on behalf of the taxpayers of Macomb County, is if they say that's a nice looking design, but we don't want to spend the money for it, are we going to get some additional services for you to redesign something, implementing what the sheriff wants, implementing what Mr. Robertson wants?
If we're allowed to finish schematic design, we're going to come back with a schematic design package for that project, or maybe it's a hybrid of a couple things. How you fund that, I can't answer that question. That's the county's finance department, I assume. We're going to work with them to, develop some options for that. And I don't know how the answer to that, but if the answer is no, we can't move forward, we need a project half the size, yeah, that's a totally different project, and you got to kind of start over, unfortunately.
Commissioner, I know you yielded the floor to me. I'm going to let you finish, because I think I know where you're going.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I mean, this is in some ways like continuing to pay architecture firm to design a new home for yourself that you're not sure you're going to get the financing for yet. And at some point, you might need to stop and say, get pre-approved at the bank, or get the taxpayers to approve a bond or a millage or something before you keep putting more money into the design. So I'm wondering if it's appropriate to commit another $720,000 to a project that if we put it on the ballot, the taxpayers might say no. Or there might be some other funding issue that we have to overcome. So I just wonder if it might be appropriate as a county, to say, this is a great proposal, let's put it on hold right now to figure out how we're going to pay for it, and then come back and decide whether then we should be moving forward. Another $720,000 on top of the good work that they've already provided. It's not going to do us any good if we can't afford to build it.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm looking, I got to hit the detail. Looks like Commissioner Kleinfeld, you're next.
No, it's wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Duje, sorry.
It's
like, wow, I just...
Wow. I'm going to take this personally, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer all this, is Mr. Smeagol still here? You're up. You're up. Steve, question. We're not going to go into petty cash and pay for this, obviously. Is it possible, how bad is running a $400 million bond through going to hurt our rating with the bonding companies? And can we do that?
I can't answer that question today. There's a lot of moving parts to something like that. This will certainly need a dedicated millage. There's no way around it. One of the challenges is you need to know how much you need to, what the construction cost is going to be, so you can figure out what that millage should be. It will be what is called an unlimited tax obligation.
Right.
Most of our bonds are limited tax, which means it has to be paid from our normal operating millage, and unlimited is a debt instrument where the millage rate fluctuates year to year based on the tax base that's paying, that millage is being applied against. So, in other words, if you have a 2008, you raise the millage. I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah.
Just bear with me. So you then are allowed to raise the millage rate to whatever is necessary to generate the revenue to pay the debt service. Unlimited obligations generally have a more favorable rating than unlimited because there's more assurances from the investor community that you're going to raise that revenue and be able to pay those obligations.
Right.
So where I'm going with this is it may not negatively impact our rating.
Okay, but if I'm not mistaken, when we were talking originally for the bond rating a few years ago, the ability to bond a lot more money was...
We have plenty of room in our legal debt margin.
Yes.
We have plenty of margin there.
Okay, thank you. That, I didn't
We have plenty
remember legal debt margin.
The legal debt margin, we have plenty of room there. We have very little room to issue more limited tax and pay for it out of the general operating millage. An unlimited, dedicated millage may not necessarily negatively impact our rating. What would generally happen is we're actually in the process now of having a financial advisory firm work on some projected debt service schedules and based on certain price points and things of that nature, not knowing what the final price may be. And if this comes to a point where we're asking the board to put a millage on the ballot, we'll have those folks will be able to give us a better idea of what it may impact our rating.
Well, and thank you, Steve. The reason I think it's important that we all keep this in mind, we've been talking about a new jail for at least 15 to 20 years. We've been covering the costs of a variety of unfortunate incidents that happen at the jail at this point in time. Is all that going to be able to be equivalent to what the new jail will be? Don't know. But if I'm not mistaken, there is room, and I think it's very important on Steve's behalf and finance's behalf to already take a look at this and try to get us some answers further down the line. The $720,000 to get final schematics, they had 5 original ideas that they wanted to do. They've narrowed it down to 1. The schematics are to get into the nitty-gritty and to figure out how this is going to work and then price it out accordingly. So I understand Commissioner Drolette's reservations, but I think if we just kill it off and not do anything with it now is the wrong thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Commissioner Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too as well understand your concerns, Commissioner Droulette, and thank you for your explanation and clarification on it. But my understanding of what we were discussing was the schematic design will not only give a pictorial of what's being built, it will help you in ascertaining operational costs, part-time employees, and I agree we don't need the Hotel Hilton design. But the opposite side of what Commissioner Droulette is saying, if you have to take this, assuming it's voted on to go onto the ballot, and sell it to the residents, I don't imagine you're going to be standing up there going like this, saying this is what I think it could look like, or this is where your dollars are going to go. You're going to need something factual and actual that I as a resident can say, yep, that's whether I agree with the aesthetics of it or not, the practicality of it or not, is something that you're going to have in your hand. So we can sit here and say, do we need a jail or don't we need a jail? How do we fund it? Are we going to put it on the ballot? At this particular juncture, there's no answer to that. And that's why I appreciate your comments, Commissioner. But the reality is, if you don't have something in your hand, you've got no chance of trying to get this past the residents. And we had, with Commissioner Cabelli, had talked about that. I still think you're going to need the best public relations firm in the U.S. To put this on the ballot, because it's not going to be the only thing that could end up on this ballot as well. So do I want to spend, I want to get it correctly, $720,000? No. Do I think you have to? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Good points. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to piggyback on that a little bit, let's make this very clear, and I'll let the cat out of the bag. This will be going to the vote of the people. With that said, very eloquently, you need to have the number of what it's going to cost. You've already invested over $1 million in here with the direction that they had in the beginning. And that $995,000 plus other experts, over $1 million, to figure out where you are today was to take it and renovate it. Realizing that it's not possible to achieve the goals that they needed to do to have a functional, safe facility for not only the sheriffs, but the inmates, they had to go a different route. There's not an option, in my opinion, I don't want to spend $720,000, but that $720,000 is going to let us know what we need to ask the people to approve. And we can't even discuss anything further until you know what that dollar figure is going to be. Now, it's not a waste unless somehow something miraculously changes and we go back to the architect, and no disrespect to any other commissioner, it's not an a la carte thing. It's either the sheriff hired the right professionals and they're coming forth and saying this is what we want. And listen, I'm only one commissioner, and at the end of the day, I don't want to spend money on a facade and ask the people, $10 more a month compared to $10 less because it's not a round facility outside. Those are my concerns. I need the functionality, the safety for both the workers and the inmates. So at the end of the day, we have to know how we get to that dollar figure to ask. So that's just my opinion on that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Commissioner Kleinfeld.
And I was going to say what Commissioner Haas said, so this will be very quick. We may be talking about a capital outlay millage, but I don't know if we also may be talking about an operational, and whether or not we can combine the two, I'm not sure. So that's, Steve, that's something you're going to have to look into, but from the looks of what I'm seeing out there, I think I hit the nail on the head. Thank you.
Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. I think the only one cheaper than Leon is myself, and and that's a fact. But if you're going to use the analogy, let's use the analogy of purchasing a new car. They're going to bring it out of that showroom. You're going to look at it. You want to know what does it have? Does it have power steering, brake? And I'm using that as the analogy. And the same thing here. We're going to have this in front of us. If we're going to have to sell this, I want to know what I'm selling. And I want to know, what's it going to cost down to? They said hard numbers. And I think the only way we're going to be doing this, and again, I'm with you, Leon, and it gets about halfway down my throat and it sticks, but it needs to be done. That $720's got to be spent. I want to see what I'm getting for, as they say, the bang for your buck. So I'm on board with that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then if the voters reject it, we spent $1.5 million on a pretty picture. I need to know more about what our options are financially moving forward from Finance Department than I can expect Steve to present right now, right here. I want to know what the impact is going to be given to certain directions. We've spent a lot of time and energy talking about what we want and not a lot about how we're going to pay for it publicly. And, yes, we have an estimate, the $270 million, $300 million. That's enough for us to stop for a second and ask our Finance Department, ask what types of plans are available, what maybe we can do under our current property taxes, and what might we need to ask for. Maybe it's more or less than we expect under our current tax structure. Maybe we can bond out with general obligation and not have to do a little bit less with the unlimited obligation and so forth. I need to look at those things before I say, let's bring out the car, roll it out there, throw it at the public, and commit more money to its design and its features without knowing really what our real payment options are. So I think we've gone plenty far in looking at what our needs are. Is it finished product? No. Are these additional plans necessary? Yes, once we figured out what our realistic options are as far as paying for it. So I'm thankful and appreciative of the work that's been done. I'm thankful and appreciative of all everything that's gone into it. I just want to hit the pause button and ask our Finance Department and spend a little bit of time talking about how we're going to pay for it before we go to the next step and spend another $720,000. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Commissioner Gillette, I have a question here for Director Schmiegel. Come on up. Sorry, Steve.
Goes with the territory.
Going along with what Commissioner Gillette says, and he's a strong advocate for the taxpayer. We always appreciate Leon's views. We do. We do. We do. No, it's always good to have that voice here. No, it really is. No, it's good to have that voice there. I guess the question is this. We have to absolutely take this to the public. There's no way we can take this from general fund.
No way.
Okay, fair enough.
Steve, I want to get a presentation on that. I'm not satisfied with that right now. I appreciate your opinion on it, and I'm sure it's going to be right, but I'm going to dig in the numbers with you on that.
Yeah, we can. We are at our maximum millage rate as we stand today.
I mean, what bonds are expiring? When are they expiring, our existing bond structure?
2025 is the last, 2025 will have no more outstanding debt other than the retiree healthcare bonds and the central campus bonds, and they mature in 2035.
Great.
And they're small, the ones that are rolling off in the next 2 or 3, 4 years are smaller issues.
So we're going to be
Yeah, you are speaking out of line. It's okay. I don't want to get into a dialogue about it. I get your point. I think everybody here gets your point. I think what we have to address, though, here, I'll be the final speaker, hopefully, is, look, the sheriff has been waiting a long time. He's invested in a lot of different people back there who have looked at a lot of different things. I think part of the concern, Leanne, as I was addressing earlier, is that the theory of direct supervision kind of came into play in the last year and a half, okay? And because of that, that's why we're looking at getting a schematic design that's going to incorporate that theory into this. And then it's going to be up to the sheriff, as Commissioner Haw says, to really present it to the public and take what this architect is going to do, take that so that the public can make a decision based on that. So with that, I'm going to not ask any other questions. Yes, go ahead.
I'll call a question.
Okay. This is for items 8A and B. Is there a second? Commissioner Haw. Okay, let's put it to vote. No. Question. Call the question. Call the question, whether or not we're going to put it on a vote.
No, this is on calling the question. There's no reason to call the question because there's no other speakers, so there's no reason for two votes.
That's a good point. She's a good point there. There's no other speakers. Let's just vote on it. This is for items 8A and B.
This is the items themselves, not
That's correct, not to call the question. Okay, the item passes 11-1 with Commissioner Drollet. Not too surprising, not voting for it. That's fair enough. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. I know we went over a little bit, but there were some tough questions, and it was a good presentation.
And I appreciate the time, and again, I'd like to thank, our professionals behind us. We wouldn't have got to this point without them. But what I do want to remind this board, I did hear a lot of the sheriff is going to have to sell this. This is our jail. It's also your jail. We're all in this together. It's not just me.
No, you're absolutely right, Sheriff.
It's all of us.
Yeah.
So
you're absolutely right about that, 100%.
Yep.
We agree with you on that 100%.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's move on now to new business. Is there any new business? Any new business? Okay, Commissioner Kleinfeld?
There were a couple of commissioners that talked to me about, with regard to the UHY thing, that it was the process wasn't followed. I just want to point out to people today, we waived a competitive bid. We voted on 3 items where we didn't see any of the other bids. That's a very common occurrence on this board. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Kleinfeld. Commissioner Haw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to make the commissioners aware, because we had a pseudo conversation about the possibility of a newsletter going to retirees. I've obtained a copy of the Roseville newsletter, presented it to the chairman, and they're going to investigate. Currently, there's 800 retirees being notified of something like 3,800 that had chose not to get it, so they're going to look at the possibility of being able to send something to them with the cost coming out of the retirement.
Thank you, Commissioner Haw. Any other new business? Anybody else have any other new business? Okay, we're going to move on to public participation. Anybody have any public participation? Going once, going twice? Boy, this place cleared out real quick. All right, closing public participation, motion to adjourn. Leon Drollet, supported by Andre Duge. Yep, all right.
Sure, Rick, we're not done yet.